Well, Nicky Steez, NFL fanatics watching this channel, the season is over, which means the playoffs are set to begin. We have a loaded show from recapping the events of Week 18, the head coaching departures, and previewing the wild card round. Let's just get right to it.
Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steez! On the My Channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue think and slate, dropping unrealistic man. 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach LeBron to Philly. Avoid you watching the Eagles all the way through the early 22. Authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keep things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the reals that fill the day.
Hello. Happy Tuesday afternoon, folks. It is 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're back to our more traditional time slot for the recap now that the holiday season is officially over and we officially kicked in with the new year. So we starting off. We got Chad in the chat. Here we are. We got a lot to talk about, folks. NFL Week 18's in the books. We're going to talk about the important matchups in that game. We had a few NFL head coach departures. We're going to talk about that. And then we got the wild card round coming up. So we're going to have a loaded show for you folks. We're doing this both on my channel and the Hardcore Sports Network. Here's the links to both. There's the link to the show on my channel. And here's the link to the show on the Hardcore Sports Network. Awesome. So, and also here's the links to my channel. Oh, and then there's a link to the Hardcore Sports Network. I know I'm sharing it under it does. You guys don't care. Well, I'm not getting into it. But now we got a lot to talk about, so folks. So let's get into it. So thanks for stopping by, making this an awesome stream. Let's get right into it. We're gonna start with the first major headline that occurred Saturday, and that was with the Baltimore Ravens clinching the AFC North, defeating the Cleveland Browns pretty handedly in an impressive fashion to officially clinch the AFC North. They also officially got some help with the Steelers, but the Ravens took care of business by a score of 35-10, defeating their division rival, making up for that one upset that happened earlier in the season. If you had Baltimore Ravens, it was lights out for them. In this game, it was lights out for them. This one, you had Lamar Jackson. He played through 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry at 138 yards rushing. Another excellent performance from Derrick Henry. Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews got in on the action in the passing game. I mean, for the Browns, they were forced to start Bailey Zappi. Yes, Bailey Zappi, the Mac Jones clone from New England, started in this contest. But ultimately, the Baltimore Ravens took care of business. Their defense got turnovers. Nate Wiggins got an interception. Michael Pierce got an interception. Nate Wiggins has done pretty solid for himself throughout the season in this contest. All around, impressive performance by the Baltimore Ravens to build momentum for the playoffs and to officially clinch the number 3 seed. Now, they did get some help along the way later that night from their division rival, the Cincinnati Bengals, interestingly enough, because you had later that night the Bengals beat the Steelers, and then to cap it off, the next then which had playoff implications, but then the next day the Broncos destroyed the Kansas City backups in a shutout, which did officially knock the Cincinnati Bengals out of playoff contention. Now, we're starting on this one with the Cincinnati Bengals first off. Simple story put, the Cincinnati Bengals got hot too late. We often hear about teams getting hot at the right time and building momentum headed into the playoffs, like i.e. the 07 Giants with, that led to that Super Bowl 42 upset. Like we say, i.e., Kansas City last year around playoff time got hot. You can use so many different examples. The Steelers in 05 when they won Super Bowl 40, but Cincinnati Bengals was the opposite. This was the team that got hot too late. They started the season 4-8. They tried to rally, and they did win 5 straight to their credit. They finished with a winning record, but unfortunately, it was too little too late. They're going to miss the playoffs. The Denver Broncos rallied to 10 wins and clinched the playoffs for the first time since the 2015 season when they won Super Bowl 50 against the Carolina Panthers in Peyton Manning's final season. So, but to the Broncos, hey, I give them credit. They did exceed expectations. Now, granted, they did do so off the backs of an easy schedule, but the Broncos found a way to win 10 games. They clinched the playoff spot. So I got to give them that. Sean Payton, say what you want to say about him. He may not be a perfect head coach, but he's certainly the best head coach the Broncos have had in years. And it seems like for whatever reason, he's more content on Bo Nix than he was with Russell Wilson. But that's a whole nother story in of itself. But for the Steelers, man, it's another one of those seasons with the Steelers, man, where you just win 9-10 games, sneak in the playoffs, but don't look like a threat going into the playoffs. It's another typical season for the Steelers. Now, it did start off for them looking like they might actually be a contender. They started 10-3, but when we beat them at home, it started the 4-game losing streak to close the season, and thus ultimately the Pittsburgh Steelers dropped to the 6th seed and are just looking like a first-round elimination waiting to happen again. And even then, Russell Wilson throughout the season, he looked a little bit better than he did with the Broncos, but he still didn't look that great. He still looked like he's past his peak. And that, recent years, Russell Wilson played his way to the Hall of Fame, but that's not the point. The point is the Steelers started off hot, but now they're just looking like another playoff elimination waiting to happen. They went from 3 straight 9-win seasons now to a 10-win season. But at what cost? They didn't really get anything out of it. But the Bengals, hey, credit to that offense. Joe Burrow played lights out, did his best. The offense was on fire, but the defense struggled at times. They didn't really get it together till the right time. But ultimately, the Denver Broncos did what they did, and they ultimately clinched the playoff spot. So congrats to the Broncos. And then we did have the throat filler game between the Dolphins and the Jets, with the Jets won, thus officially knocking the Dolphins out of the playoffs. But there was one interesting headline out of it. Aaron Rodgers threw for his 500th career touchdown. Hey, let's face it. We've all made fun of Aaron Rodgers for this season, and reasonably so. Let's face it. Aaron Rodgers, he was washed up. We all saw it this season, and the one good thing is he did get his 500th career touchdown. He's already got a Hall of Fame legacy. He's got 5 MVPs, a Super Bowl win, and he's got 500 career touchdowns. So at least one good thing came out of it for the Jets and for Aaron Rodgers this season. So congrats to Aaron Rodgers on 500 career touchdowns. We'll never be able to take that away from you. But what more interesting is we have the Chargers clinching the 5th seed in the AFC by beating the Raiders, and the Steelers losing. That moves the Chargers up over them. They'll play the Houston Texans. And the Commanders did officially clinch the 6th seed with their win against the Cowboys. Now they'll play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are the number 3 seed. And that happened off the Rams losing to the Seahawks in what was a competitive game. But hey, so for now, all I'm going to say is congrats to the Chargers. They got an easy game against the Raiders, but hey, take the win. Take the easy win, move yourself up to the 5 seed, get the favorable matchup on the road against Houston. because that was the more favorable between them and the Ravens. So congrats to the Chargers and the Commanders. Hey, you won out. You had yourself a hell of a season. Yeah, Jaden Daniels did awesome. And Tony, it looks like as an Eagles fan, Commanders are going to be a team to watch out for the future as long as Jaden Daniels stays healthy and as long as he doesn't pull a CJ Stroud regression. So I got to give a shout out to the Commanders as well. And it'll be interesting to see how they match up against the Bucs. Remember, the Bucs beat them earlier in the season, but hey, that was week 1. The Commanders didn't find themselves yet. It's a different matchup this time around, but we'll talk about that more later on in the set show when we preview the playoff matchups. But before we get there, you guys know, right after the final week, late Sunday into Black Monday, it's always that time where NFL teams part ways with head coaches. And now, so we got some stories to talk about, folks. So we're going to talk about the NFL head coaching departures before we get into the playoff preview. And I'm going to give my thoughts on it. You guys can also feel free, as always, give your comments in the chat. So let's start off. First one we're going to start off with occurred before the 4 o'clock games finished on Sunday, before officially over. The New England Patriots parted ways with head coach Jerod Mayo. I briefly touched up on this in one of YouTube short on Sunday. I mean, my thoughts, I get it. The Patriots had a disappointing season. And Jerod Mayo, he didn't really do much to inspire hope for the future. But at the same time, he didn't really have much to work with either going into the season because this Patriots team was a dumpster fire. We went into the season, most of us as fans thought, myself included, the Patriots are in a deep rebuild. So I figured this would be something that would take time. Now, granted, Jerod Mayo didn't do anything to really inspire the team, but considering how deep a rebuild the Patriots were in, the bar was low. And honestly, the problem with firing a coach after one season in a deep rebuild is you don't know what you're going to get. Now, we don't know if there was a situation where locker room chemistry was on the low and the morale was down. Because remember, Dan Campbell, his first season, the Lions only won 3 games. But locker room morale improved, and there were signs of hope for the future in spite of the fact they only won 3 games. Now, I don't know what was going on in the locker room. I don't know if that had part to do with it, or if the Patriots, maybe this is a possibility. Maybe they really wanted Mike Vrabel, and he wasn't available for them last year. So maybe they just used Jerod Mayo as a temporary fill-in, or maybe they saw locker room morale decrease throughout the season and they just felt like, okay, Jerod Mayo is not the answer. We need to find someone else. I mean, I don't know because I wasn't there. These are all just possibilities. Or maybe it could be Robert Kraft becoming increasingly impatient with his age and he wouldn't want to wait and give Jerod Mayo time to turn it around. I mean, these are all different possibilities. I don't know because I'm not there, but I mean, who knows? The only ones that truly know are the people in the New England Patriots organization as of right now. We don't have all the inside scoop. And plus, me as an Eagles fan, I'm following the Eagles more than the Patriots. But I think personally, from my point of view, it was too soon. You had a team that was in a deep rebuild. You're going to give the coach time to work it out and turn things around. And a team in a deep rebuild is not going to automatically pull it together year 1. Case in point, the Dallas Cowboys with Jimmy Johnson. Year 1, they looked like a dumpster fire with Jimmy Johnson. But ultimately, hey, they won 3 Super Bowls at Eagles fans' expense. And Jimmy Johnson's remembered as one of the greatest head coaches in NFL history. But point is, they had a dumpster fire first year, but it took time to turn it around. You could look at Dan Campbell currently with Detroit Lions. First year, only 3 wins. It took time to turn it around. But now they got home field advantage. They're the top team in the NFC. Now, it's obviously Jerod Mayo, but the thing is, he was a first-time coach, but at the same time, he was stuck in a deep rebuild. Now here you are stuck in the same position. Now you're taking your quarterback in Drake May and trying to give him a new head coach. He has to learn a whole new system. And the players that are staying now have to learn a whole new system next season after trying to get used to the previous head coach. So I personally wasn't the biggest fan of it. I understand he didn't do great, but considering the situation the Patriots are in, what did you really expect from that? Honestly, so I'm not the biggest fan of that move from just a football analyst standpoint, but now we're going to have to see what happens. Now, is there a possibility maybe Mike Vrabel could be the next head coach. I mean, maybe he has history with the Patriots. He was a former player, but time will tell on that one. But that's another subject for another time. In the meantime, we're moving on to a coach who, to everyone's eyes, was due for a firing. Some of us were shocked he didn't get fired during the season, and that's Doug Peterson. We saw the writing on the wall, especially with the Jaguars having an abysmal season. A lot of us thought he was going to get canned before the season was over, but I guess Jacksonville just decided they wanted maybe Tony Khan was thinking to himself, okay, maybe he was thinking of head coaches that could replace him during the season, and he wanted to wait till the off season. He didn't want to bring in an interim coach and then come back next year with a new head coach. So maybe he just waited till the season was over. I don't know. I'm not in his mind. But either way, that's the only explanation I could think of for why they kept him the whole season. They wanted to wait till the season was over so they could move in and actually finding a full-time head coach instead of using an interim coach. But with that being said, Doug Peterson was long overdue. This guy, I understand as Eagles fans, we have a bit of a soft spot for him because our first and only Super Bowl win to date came with Doug Peterson as our head coach. So as Eagles fans, thank you, Doug Peterson. Thank you, Nick Foles, Alshon Jeffrey, so on and so forth. But thank you, Doug Peterson, for that. But ultimately, it didn't pan out. Ultimately, he didn't pan out the Eagles. He had that one great season, that one Super Bowl run. But after that, you had two above average seasons, then a 4-11-1 season. Then Jacksonville brought him in. He had a 9-win season. They took advantage of a crappy division and a collapsing Titans in 2022, won the division. Then last year they started off 8-3, but then they collapsed late in the season and ended up missing out on the playoffs. And then this year they were just a dumpster fire. I mean, clearly Doug Peterson, it's obvious to me he was just a one-hit wonder as a head coach. I mean, now he's pretty much done as a head coach to me. I mean, Jacksonville he took the offer with Jacksonville because Jacksonville was desperate for a head coach with some credibility. Hey, Grega, thanks for stopping by. I know you enjoyed those little shorts I uploaded earlier. And hey, so thanks for that. And thanks for stopping by, as always, showing your support. Grega John, the longtime fan, you came just in time to talk about Dougie P., the former Eagles coach. So you came right at a good time. And Peterson, yes, folks, for those of you wondering what he's talking about, I uploaded some YouTube shorts on my channel, doing some working out in the snow with Rocky IV music. So if you guys haven't checked out my channel, you can check out my channel. Here's the link to that right there. So if you guys want to check it out, feel free to do so. And as I was saying, man, Doug Peterson obviously was a disappointing run with the Jaguars. You take away that first season, which was kind of a fluke playoff run, like I said, off the backs of the Titans collapsing and the Chargers collapsing in the wild card round. If you take that away, what does Doug Peterson have to show for in Jacksonville? Especially the way they collapsed last year and won 9 games, followed by this season being abysmal. It's obvious he's not the long-term answer, and he's not the long-term answer as a head coach. He's a one-hit wonder, which luckily for me, it was with my team, the Philadelphia Eagles. It worked out. But since then, I don't think it's over. One thing's for sure, he's not going to be a head coach anymore. Maybe he'll be assistant coach. Maybe he'll end up stuck in college or high school somewhere, but I don't see him as a head coach anymore. I just don't see it happening. Broadcasting, I've never really been a fan of his communication style. I would not want to see him as an analyst personally. So that's just me. But yes, Doug Peterson was overdue, and the Jaguars were right to move on from him. Now they got to go back to the drawing board and get themselves a real head coach. Now I understand why they brought him in. It was like, hey, you're bringing in a former Super Bowl winning head coach who had who at least had that qualification. So I don't necessarily fault the Jaguars for it. Now I got the Titans parted ways with Ran Carthon, their head coach. This came out about an hour ago. That's the third head coach let go. And for the Titans, it's like, look, I mean, granted, he didn't exactly inspire confidence, but what exactly did he do? Then again, the Titans, similar to the Patriots, were a team stuck in a terrible predicament where it's like, what were they really going to get out of it? I mean, this was their first season with a new head coach. So what were they going to do? It kind of similar to Gerard Mayo. He got stuck in a bad predicament where he didn't have much to work with. He was just left as a one and done. But I mean, granted, he didn't really do much to move the needle. And yes, at the risk of sounding repetitive like I did with Mayo, what was he given to work with in Tennessee? And it's the same situation with the Titans. You brought in a new head coach. After one season, you're canning him. Now you're bringing in a new coach. The players have to learn a whole new system. A team that's in a deep rebuild. It's hard to rebuild when you don't have a coach to get used to. You don't have a coach to adjust to grow under playing. And that's the same problem here. That's the problem with the Titans, with Ran Carthon, and the problem with the Patriots under Gerard Mayo. But, I mean, I understand they didn't get anything out of it, but for a team in a deep rebuild, you got to give these coaches time. And I feel like both the Patriots and Titans made a big mistake parting ways with their head coaches. Whereas opposed to the New York Giants, who've actually had 3 seasons, Mara says the GM and the coach are staying. Oh, Giants. You always provide us great comedy, don't you? You reached heavy on Daniel Jones during the draft in 2019 that your fans were not a fan of. Then you went. What is else? Then you went. So you had that one good season with Brian DeBall. You paid Daniel Jones. So Saquon ended up leaving, coming to the Eagles. Thank you, Giants. And then ultimately, you ended up releasing Daniel Jones the second season, that big contract. You had Brian DeBall had regressed as a head coach significantly. The GM hasn't shown much promise, and you're keeping them both. And Eli tried to defend them too, which he's trying to defend them with you can't always part ways, which I understand because I just said you don't want to give up on a new coach or new GM after 1 year. However, in the case of the Giants, you're talking about this has been 3 seasons. This team has not improved in that stretch. This team has actually regressed. They had a few better. This year they were a dumpster fire. Even Pat Shurmur was better for them. I mean, geez Louise. You also had Joe Judge during his first season was better than this. I mean, the last 2 seasons under Brian DeBall have been abysmal. Like, I think after 3 years, you can make a reasonable case if you've seen the team regress from year 1 that it's time to part ways with the coach. So I don't see what the Giants are doing bringing them back. I mean, granted, it is part the players, but it's also part the coaching in the front office too. Now, in the case of, like, say, the Raiders, as Greg will point out, Raiders coach is still with them for now, referring to Antonio Pierce. Now, in the case of Antonio Pierce, I'm cool with him still being there. I think that was the right move because the Raiders are stuck. Yeah, they don't really have much to work with. They kind of handicapped Antonio Pierce similar to the way that the Patriots and Titans did with their first-year head coaches. But the Raiders, at least, I guess, had enough sense to realize, okay, to be fair, our coach didn't have much to work with. I mean, they understand player morale is up. So they're at least going to give them another chance and try to improve the roster around them first, which I think is a smart move. Because this was Antonio Pierce's first full season with very little to work with. Like I said, when you have a team that's in a deep rebuild, you got to give the coaches time. See Jimmy Johnson. See Dan Campbell. See Dick Vermeil with the Eagles and the Rams. You got to give it time. So I do feel like the Raiders are making the right call because, like I say, Antonio Pierce, it's only one full season. You got to give it more time and improve the roster. I feel like the Giants are the ones making the big mistake because they've had time and they haven't seen any results. So, I mean, those are my thoughts right there on the NFL head coaching firings. What we really have to do is now wait and see what these teams do to follow up. And we'll talk about it more then once they make a hire. And, I can evaluate whether I think it's a good or bad hire from there. But in the meantime, I'm going to take a quick break because we still got a lot more to talk about. We're going to talk about the wild card round, preview the upcoming matchups, and the keys to victories. So I'm going to step aside for a second, take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk about the wild card round. So stay tuned. All right, I'm back, folks. I am back. Now, after that quick break, now it's time to break down and talk about the wild card round. And we're gonna get right into it. Because we got the super card round. Let's talk about it. So we're gonna start off. We're gonna look at the schedule. Because there's some interesting games on this matchup. There's a few games that I'm kind of like, but there are some games I'm looking forward to as well. I'm going to go through them, and you guys in the chat, feel free to comment. Let me know which games you're looking forward to the most. Here we go, folks. We got the schedule set. We got, start things off, Saturday. We got the Los Angeles Chargers going against the Houston Texans, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on CBS. Then we got later that night, 8 p.m. on Prime, the Baltimore Ravens hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers in the rubber match. Both teams split during the regular season, winning their respective home game. Now it's the Ravens with home field for the wild card matchup. And then on Sunday, we got the number 2 seed Buffalo Bills hosting the Denver Broncos at 1 p.m. on CBS. Then my team, the Philadelphia Eagles, hosting the Green Bay Packers, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fox. And then at night, 8 p.m., the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Washington Commanders, rematch from Week 1. And then Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ESPN and ABC, you got the Los Angeles Rams hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Those are going to be some interesting matchups, folks. And it's interesting. You got the Vikings as the team that only lost 3 games as the wild card seed after getting stomped by the Detroit Lions. That's interesting because but in that game, though, that could set the momentum for the playoffs because Sam Darnold, who did make the Pro Bowl and had himself a nice season, he was looking good, but ultimately in the game that mattered most, he did not play well up to expectations. And I wonder, how's that going to affect the Vikings against the Rams? So that's one interesting factor headed into this matchup. And of course, you got my team, the Eagles, against the Packers. Obviously, I got some bias involved, so I'm looking forward to that. And the other games, I'm looking forward to. Right, and Greg saying great matchups. And to everyone in the chat, just a friendly reminder, feel free to comment in the chat which games you're looking forward to the most. I'll be glad to hear which ones you're most intrigued by. Me, obviously, I got the Eagles and Packers. And then like Ravens and Steelers, I'm interested to see just because of the rivalry between those two teams. Even though this looks like going to be a win for the Ravens, but it's always an interesting matchup with the Steelers and Ravens. There's just an it factor about those two teams playing each other that just draws intrigue. Whatever reason it is, just something there that has an it factor that just makes you want to at least watch. Even if it's not the 2 best offenses in the league, there's always that it factor that's worth watching. And Rams Vikings, that's going to be an interesting matchup for me. So those are the ones I'm looking forward to the most. Chargers Texans, it's just something to watch and follow to me. I'm not the most excited about that. Buffalo and Denver, I'm not really that excited about. Washington, Tampa Bay has some interest. But then for me, I'm looking forward to the Eagles, Packers the most because that's my team. I have my bias there. And then the Rams and Vikings outside of my team would be the most interesting matchup. So I'm looking forward mostly Eagles, Packers, Rams, and Vikings. We're going to talk about this right here. These are the ones we're looking for. So we're going to talk a little bit about each matchup, give a little bit of a preview. We got ESPN on here. Got the Gamecast right here. We can check this out. The odds right now are in favor of the Chargers in this case, obviously, which is to be expected. But to me, I think in this matchup here, Chargers. And I got to go with the Chargers in this first matchup against the Texans. Personally, we look at this matchup. The Chargers are obviously favorites. They had the better record. Justin Herbert had himself a good statistical season, 23 TDs to 3 INTs. J.K. Dobbins had himself a nice season on the ground. And then Joe Mixon really carried the weight for this offense. I feel like without him, they wouldn't have had a 10-win season. which proves the Joe Mixon acquisition to be a great pickup for the Texans. While the Bengals' run game missed out. I mean, don't get me wrong, their passing game was great, but I just get that feeling if the Bengals still had that running back, they could have had themselves a better season and maybe snuck in the playoffs. But Mixon's a great asset to the Texans, especially where CJ Stroud struggled and regressed, as you see, 20 TDs to 12 INTs. Mixon, really, helped out. He really pulled his weight and helped out with his team. So I got to give him props. And then I look at that right there. But I just feel like, the Chargers are the better team because the Texans have struggled throughout the season against good teams. Now, to be fair, the Chargers, for the most part, have had a softer schedule, too. Like, we look at their schedule, they beat teams like the Raiders. I mean, they beat mostly poor teams, but also, they played better down the season. They have more momentum heading into this game. So I do think for them, though, they can win this. And plus, to be fair, the Texans struggled against good teams as well, but they struggled in more embarrassing fashion where even though the Chargers lost some games, some of the better teams like the Ravens, they actually put up a fight against the Ravens. They actually made it a competitive game. Even the Steelers, even though they lost, they actually kept it competitive, whereas the Texans losing to Kansas City and Baltimore did not look that impressive. So I got them, and so I got the Chargers winning that matchup. Then we got the night game, Steelers and Ravens. At this point, I got to take the Ravens because, number one, they're at home and they got the momentum headed in their favor. Because let's face it, Ravens, they clinched the division. On the offensive side of the ball, Lamar Jackson is playing lights out. He has 41 touchdown passes on the season, folks. Yes, right. Lamar Jackson, 41 touchdown passes on the season. His best statistical season thus far as a passer. And then Russell Wilson only has 16 TDs. So while he's played a little bit better than he did in Denver, he hasn't really played all that spectacular. And then you got Lamar Jackson played great. Then you got Derrick Henry leading the way. Najee Harris had an over 1,000-yard season trying to make the most of what he's had. He's played great. George Pickens has been the best receiver, but he hasn't been available for them in a bit. Is he going to come into this matchup a little rusty? And considering the Ravens got momentum, I feel like that home crowd in their favor, they've been playing better football headed into this one. Hey, I feel like this is the Ravens' time to win. Take care of business against the Steelers. Now, I understand the Ravens' playoff history has been a bit questionable, but then again, the Steelers are ultimately just usually a one-and-done team anyway. So, that being said, now moving on to the Broncos and Bills. While the Broncos, I give them credit, they've had a solid season. Bo Nix, he's been up and down playing-wise. He had 29 TDs to 12 INTs, but when I look at the Broncos' schedule, I don't see a team that's really impressed me. From what I've seen, they've beaten up on teams like the Raiders. They had the benefit of playing the NFC South, which has been a relatively poor division. Most of their games, like they played the Cleveland Browns, they mostly had an easy schedule. They haven't really beaten it, and they beat Kansas City, but they beat Kansas City's backups. I'm not impressed. I'll take Buffalo to win this matchup. Josh Allen's been playing some of his best football. 28 TDs, 6 INTs. Excellent season there by Josh Allen. So I'm going to take Buffalo in this matchup. Then it's my team, the Eagles versus the Packers. I'm going to talk about this more in a separate live stream, but I'll give you a small little preview here. Eagles have been they've been hot throughout the season. Saquon Barkley won the rushing title. A.J. Brown's been on point. Jordan Love, the Packers, Josh Jacobs has been the threat for their offense, but the Packers, they struggled against their division mightily. They went 1-5 against their division this year with 11-6 record. Their only loss outside of that was actually to the Eagles. They got swept by the Vikings, swept by the Lions, lost to the Bears, split with them. So we're the only team to beat them outside their own division. And considering that the Packers, like I said, and remember, they struggled against the division, one of the better division, in the best division in football. So I got the Eagles in this one. I feel like we got the momentum in our favor, but we can't sleep on the Packers because remember last year they pulled up the upset against the Cowboys. But to be fair, that was a different situation. But you got Saquon playing. I feel like Jalen Hurts will be cleared to play. We should win this one. Take care of business with the home crowd on our side. Move on to the divisional round. I got the Eagles in this one. And I'll have a bigger preview of that coming later this week. And then you got Commanders versus Bucks. I'm going to take the Commanders in this one because remember the Bucks. People are going to point to the fact that Bucks beat them week 1, but you have to remember that was Jaden Daniels' first start. It was their first time as a team. First game, there's always going to be bumps in the road. There's always going to be growing pains. You're always going to have to look back on the tape from your first time and say, okay, here's what we need to work on to get better going forward. And that's what happened to them. Whereas the Bucks were a team that, for the most part, most of the players were familiar with the system. It was a coach they got used to in Todd Bowles. They had the leverage of having more experience together as a team in that first matchup. But now here you are, wild card round, Washington took their time, they built chemistry, and they've won more games. So I'm going to take the Commanders in this one now that they've gotten themselves together and they're more of a complete team. So I'll take them to beat the Bucks. So that means I'll have the Commanders, and then we get to, so I would have the Eagles beating the Packers. That eliminates the 7th seed. The 6th seed winning. So that would be the Commanders then playing the Lions versus the winner of the Vikings and Rams playing the Eagles if this were to go down that way. For that matchup, that's going to be a good one with the Rams and Vikings. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it most outside my own team's matchup. And I got to say, I think the Vikings, I don't know, it could be a toss-up because even though the Vikings are the better team on paper, remember, the Rams already beat them. And the Vikings have cruised by most of the season without any expectations. Look what happened when they had to play their toughest matchup. They faltered against the Lions. But I'm still going to, I don't know. I'm going to take the Rams in this one because I don't know how Sam Darnold's going to handle the playoff pressure. I mean, he did good during the regular season. He earned himself a Pro Bowl nod, which I give him props for. He at least won't be remembered as a complete bust. He'll at least have one Pro Bowl nod under his belt, which is at least respectable. But I think come playoff time, you're going to see Sam Darnold falter. And I think the Rams are going to win in an upset, honestly. So that means I'll have the Commanders playing the Lions and the Eagles playing the Rams in the divisional round. On the AFC side, I got Kansas City playing the Chargers, and then the Ravens playing the Bills in the divisional round. But we're going to have to see what happens, though. It's going to be interesting to see how this wild card round plays out. Now that's the playoffs. The matchups are more intriguing. We'll see what goes down, who wins and who loses. That being said, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this stream. I know it was a long one, so you may have caught part of it or most of it, but however much you caught the stream, thanks for watching. I really appreciate your support, guys. Thank you. That being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, it's your boy, Nicky Stees, signing off. Peace.